this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is a video on the SteelSeries Arena 7. This is a 2.1 speaker system for your gaming system with some RGB lighting and some very nice, interesting features that make them worth talking about. These are pretty punchy speakers with some RGB lighting about the bottom and the rear, which is able to sync with your gameplay, but more on that in a bit, and also able to deliver some pretty good sound. They're interesting because they connect to a number of different devices. So in this case, I'm using it on PC, but will also work with PlayStation, Mac, and more. You have Bluetooth connection, USB, optical, 3.5mm, and there's a headset jack as well. So you've got loads of different connection options and things that you can do with these speakers. Now, I've been testing them out on a couple of different machines and playing a lot of different games, a lot of racing games admittedly, but also other games, and just sort of messing about with the sound and just general experiences of these speakers so I can talk about what it's like to use. Now, a pretty nice RGB synced system, which does give some nice highlights to it. I said that it has some RGB syncing with your games, so you can see it here with control, where I've turned all the lights off. And basically the RGB glow that you're seeing on the wall behind is purely from the speakers. So there's some lighting changes that you can do through a SteelSeries GG software within the engine and the Prism app to sync it up with what's happening in game. It's not perfect, but it does add some interesting aesthetics to it, which you wouldn't otherwise have, obviously. I do prefer something like Philips Hue gradient kit, which I've done a video on recently, which is really good for syncing what's on the screen. But you can see it adds still a nice sort of interesting highlight to your area and the gaming space, both the desk and the rear, because it's rear firing RGB as well. Now I'm going to quickly unbox and show you what's included in the box. It's worth noting that SteelSeries has two lots of speaker setups like this. The Arena 7, which has a subwoofer, and then the Arena 3, which I'm going to do a video on separately, which is just the two speakers on their own. And the Arena 7 is interesting because it comes in quite a large box. I've got both boxes in my house, and the size difference is quite striking because it comes with a large 6.5-inch subwoofer box, which you can see here, and that's what takes up the majority of the box. And that also delivers quite a bit of punch, and you can adjust the bass on the subwoofer with a little dial on the rear, and that also obviously connects all the things, including the speakers, up to your PC and other devices. So as I said, you'll see in a second, optical connection is 3.5mm, and also you can connect up Bluetooth as well. So interesting highlights. And then the tiny little box is where the speakers are. So these are quite small speakers, but don't get the impression that that means they don't deliver good sound, because they do. They're actually quite nice speakers, good audio delivery. I'll leave all the specs and other information in the description, as well as a link to find out more about them. But they are quite nice speakers. Now, it's only a 2.1 system, so you're not getting full-on surround sound, but you can get a lot of EQ programming and simulated surround sound audio via SteelSeries Sonar software. So there's some spatial audio controls in there. My experience has actually been really good with it. When I first get out of the box, I was struck by sort of the size difference between the subwoofer, which you can see here, with a downward firing 6.5-inch sub, which gives a pretty good bass, a nice thump to it, which is enough to annoy my wife, which is a good sort of reference for how good it is, and potentially wake the kids up if they're sleeping as well, which is an issue. However, there is a headphone jack on it, so if you need to, you can plug your headphones in, and I'll show you that in a minute. But basically there's a rear headphone jack on the back of one of the speakers. That means you can just plug headphones in, and then you can switch into headphone mode if you need to play quietly at some point in the evening, for example. Setup process is also remarkably easy. Both speakers have their own thick speaker cable that plugs into the subwoofer, and then there's a USB cable which plugs in from the subwoofer to your PC, and a power cable that plugs into the subwoofer as well. Obviously, it's going to vary depending on what you're doing, whether you're using an optical connection, for example. But in the basic PC setup, it's really straightforward. Both cables are labeled left and right, so you know which one to plug into, which is handy. And the speakers are marked that way too, so it's easy to set up. The initial setup process is basically a dream and really straightforward with plug and play connectivity. And then you can go into Windows and download SteelSeries GG, dive into the engine, tweak around in there, access things like the Prism app and things like that. So you can see on the back of the subwoofer, you've got the two connectors for left and right speakers, and then a USB-C connection that plugs in the middle that runs there. But you'll also notice on the right hand side there's a sub volume adjustment, and you also have optical in and out on the bottom. There's also a 3.5mm auxiliary connector here as well. So you do have a variety of input options that you can put into the sub and then obviously put out through the speakers. So lots of different things that you can potentially connect up to it for multiple source uses, which is pretty handy. It's worth noting as well that there are multiple controls on here, and you do have the power connection on the sub. And I found that I was often turning and everything off from that power switch on the sub, because when you're not using them, obviously you want to turn the RGB lighting off. You don't want that glowing constantly, so just turn that power off at the back and then it's away. Bit of an annoyance that it's not easier to do. I kind of wish there was a easier system for this, because depending on where you put that sub, that's potentially a problem. But as standard, nice little looking speakers. They have a nice aesthetic to them. Also, a quick note is if you don't like the RGB, which would be a weird thing to buy RGB speakers and then not like it, but you can turn it off. So obviously this is the initial setup, but there's a multifunction button on the right speaker which you can press, which will turn it off. On the rear of that right speaker is the headphone jack as well, 3.5mm connection, so you can put your headphones in there when you don't want to use the speakers. Easy peasy to sort that out. And then you can see the rear firing LEDs back here as well. So you have some nice breathing, color changing RGB lighting as standard. And then you can dive into the GG software and tweak that around, change the lighting of it, change the effects, or make it match what's going on the screens. So some different effects on there. There's that tiny little button that's near the volume wheel on the right speaker can also be pressed and held to put it into a Bluetooth mode, so that you can use that for Bluetooth connectivity. Then you can simply connect up your phone and you can use that with ease. You can also tap it to turn the RGB lighting on and off. So you have a lot of convenient controls there. And then obviously the volume wheel. It's multifunction in that way, so it allows for pairing of that, switching into headset mode, turning the RGB lighting off, and doing more. Now, SteelSeries says that these speakers are adjustable on the stand to put them in the perfect position. Essentially what that means is they'll tilt back and forth a tiny little bit. They're not fully revolvable, but obviously you can just turn the stand around. And I found the positioning is pretty easy because they're not massive speakers. I've seen some other speakers recently which are pretty huge, take up a lot of desk space. These are kind of small and yet pack a good punch to them and deliver good sound. The subwoofer gets the floor thumping if you've got it on the floor, obviously downward firing, so it adds a nice bit of bass to it. Now it'd be hard for me to demo what the sound experience is like, because obviously you're not listening through the speakers, you're listening through your phone or a desktop PC or whatever device you're watching this video on. You have to take my word for it that they do deliver a good quality of sound and a nice experience, and they're multifunction and they're easy to control. Now, if your selling point is the RGB lighting, as I said already, I don't think that the screen syncing is that great, but I do think that it does add a nice sort of extra aesthetic to the desk. If you don't like it, you can turn it off, but you can see if you've got a nice sort of shiny desk like I have, you get a nice bit of glow on your desk. You also get some nice back glow behind the monitor. So lots of different things going on with it. Overall, a nice bit of kit from SteelSeries, another winner in my mind, with lots of highlights, easy customization, really good looks, great sound, and an all-around nice package. It is expensive, however, coming in at about £300, $300, so pretty pricey, but well worth a look. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Thanks for watching.